So it looks like Trump faced his first big defeat in federal court on Friday as it relates to his attempt to completely dismantle DEI. Let's break it down because on the face, this sounds like just overarching good news. But when you look down a little bit deeper, when you dig a little bit deeper, when you pull back the covers and really think about this more in a broader way, hey there, everybody. You will find that it's some good here, but it's some bad here, and it's also some ugly here. So I want to definitely talk about all of that today as we break down the latest happenings as it relates to Trump's attacks on DEI. Okay, first of all, the good news. Yesterday, a federal court came down with a ruling that said that his executive orders, in essence, nullifying DEI were illegal. And specifically, the judge suggested that they are counter to the First Amendment. And they went forward and pushed through an injunction, which basically said that the actions that the Trump administration had taken already in its desire to completely rip out DEI contractors and diversity initiatives throughout the federal government were illegal, and that they needed to be, those people who were engaged in that work need to be allowed to complete that work. So let me read for you specifically what exactly are the results of this action. Number one, it prevents the Trump administration from pausing or terminating existing federal contracts and grants related to DEI. That is big, okay? Let me repeat that. That is big. So this court injunction prohibits the Trump administration from pausing or terminating existing federal contracts and grants related to DEI initiatives. So it requires, it also, it basically maintains the status quo for institutions that were engaged in that work prior to him coming into office and ripping it out. So in other words, if you already had a contract with the federal government where you were working on these issues and he came in as he did and ripped all that away, canceled the contract, all of that, this court ruling is saying that that is unconstitutional, that it's illegal, that it likely violates the First Amendment of the Constitution. So I guess it is saying that it's unconstitutional. And it basically is looking to make the federal government and make this administration reinstate those contracts and nullify the efforts that it had taken to rip that out. That is good news. Here is the challenge, though, that I foresee with this moving forward. And first of all, I don't want to say that this is a bad thing at all. First of all, I'm so proud that, the state of Maryland, specifically Baltimore, was one of the litigants that brought this lawsuit, along with a higher education organization, I believe, that brought this lawsuit. The National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education sued, and that's what led to this specific ruling. So first of all, I want to say this is what happens, when you fight back, okay? This is what happens when you fight back, because a lot of what he's doing, we've been saying this from the beginning, is absolutely illegal. Things aren't illegal just because you say that they are illegal. So he's been called on it, and this specific court ruling has said the plaintiffs are exactly right. Trump went beyond his legal power in trying to pull back, and actually not even trying to, and actually engaging in the efforts of canceling those contracts, pulling back those opportunities for those contractors. And it has, in essence, put in place an injunction against the executive orders that Trump had put into place upon his ascension to office, meaning that his actions have, in essence, been nullified for now. Okay, does this make sense, you guys? So that is good news for those who currently have contracts that you thought were, and they were. It's not even that you thought were. They were canceled by this administration. But this judge is saying, good morning. This judge is saying, no, hold up, wait a minute. That is not legal. That's against the law, what you just did. Smack, go back to go. Okay. Go back to go. We're gonna keep this thing going. Now, here's the thing. Sorry, guys. I should have had my coffee with me, but long story. So this is what happened. So here's the thing that I predict that we have to wrestle with next, because we know how this fool is. And for those of you who are coming in late, let me just first of all just say hello to you, in case you don't know who I am. Hey there, Victoria. Hey. My name is Dr. Avis. How are you all doing? I am an award-winning author and a global speaker, a seven-figure CEO. I am also the creator of Innovation, which is a 5-part innovation series that I am hosting starting on Monday. It's really meant to help entrepreneurs right now who are reeling with all of the change that has happened under this administration, that have seen their opportunities compromised or foresee it being compromised. It's really about understanding that in these moments of great crisis and quick change and, just a boatload of confusion where other entrepreneurs are dazed and confused, that gives you the opportunity as the savvy entrepreneur to really be able to look at all of the ridiculousness that's happening and find the opportunity in the eye of the storm, and then think about, how can I innovate? How can I elevate? What else do I need to do in my business to really speak to that opportunity that exists right now so that I can grow my business? That's exactly what I did several years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, when most entrepreneurs were sort of like trying to figure out what the hell to do. And therefore they were kind of stuck in analysis paralysis. Well, while they were doing that, I was innovating, I was acting, and 8 months later, I hit my first 7 figures in my business. That's what I'll be breaking down next week as part of my innovation series. If you want to grab your spot, just go to innovation-to-elevation.com, innovation-to-elevation.com. You can get it, or just write innovate in the comments and I'll come back later and make sure you get the link. Now, with that little commercial out of the way, let me let you know what's happening right now. I've already told you what's happened. This court injunction has said that Trump's actions against DEI are illegal. Here are the implications of that. And here's what I think will happen next, given how he rolls. Okay. And I do say this not just as someone who is interested in politics. I say this as someone who has a PhD in political science and who worked in the political and policy space for decades before even starting my business. Okay. So I do say this with a bit of experiential knowledge and understanding of how ish works. Okay. Here is what I know what's going to happen. Even though this is a victory for us right now, this is a victory right now, at least for the people who currently have contracts. Here's what it's not necessarily doing, given who we know exhibits this White House, who we know he is and how he operates. What's up, Sean? Great to see you, girl. This is someone who literally, not just figuratively, thinks he's a king, acting like he's a king, moving like he's a king, revels in the idea of being a king, so much so that he literally put out a tweet from the White House Twitter account the other day, which it will always be Twitter to me. I'm not going to call it what that narcissistic Nazi calls it. So I will say that he put that tweet out last week, basically saying long live, and it did say, not even basically, long live the king. And it had a picture of him with a crown. So he believes he has that authority. This is why he came in from the very beginning, calling things illegal that were legal. Even as recently as yesterday, when he had the meeting with the governors, and the governor of Maine, it's interesting to me how the people who stand up for him 9 times out of 10 are women. For all these men are cowering. I mean, what's up, guys? Can somebody explain that to me? Okay. But yesterday, the governor of Maine stood up to him in a meeting that he had with governors, where he was saying that, he has this, the NCAA has capitulated in essence to his directive about transgender participation in women's sports, all except for Maine, he said, and he called her out. And she said, I am abiding by federal and state law. And then he said something very interesting. I don't care how you feel about that in terms of where you stand on that issue. I want you to hear about his response to what she said, when she merely said, I am following state and federal law. Okay. His response is, I am the law. Like this is the law. This is what we said. So you need to do it. In which she said, I'll see you in court. Okay. Now here's why you need to be concerned about that, because that relates to what I just told you here. Okay. Here's the thing. If you want to make a change, there are only a couple of ways you can make change in this country that really has broad, sweeping legal impact and actual legitimacy in terms of the rules of the game by which we live by in this country. You need to pass a law, okay? Or the Supreme Court either overturns a law, okay, that was in place and now says it's not, it's not constitutional and therefore it takes away, okay? So we've already lived through an example of that. That rarely happens in most of our histories past. The Supreme Court has been a vehicle by which rights have been expanded in most of our history. Okay. In most of our history, well, not all, you had Plessy v. Ferguson that basically said that there is no right that a Black man has that a white person needs to respect. That was basically that ruling. But other than that, the last time that we had a Supreme Court ruling that in essence took back laws instead of expanded laws or expanded the coverage or rights of people was the most recent decision that sort of pulled back women's right to choose. Okay. So for most of our history, what's happened is when there have been cases that have been brought up to the Supreme Court that are, well, that was the first one in terms of the law, the case that got rid of, really just undermined and eliminated the protections of women's rights to choose via Roe. Okay. Then we've also now have seen a chipping away of access to affirmative action in higher education. Okay. I want to say that these are two cases that have happened, right? The Dobbs decision and the case against affirmative action in higher education as a result of Trump packing the court with these very right-wing lawyers. Here is what I want you to be really tuned in to, okay? I have a precedent for being treated like law. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm not a fan of that, but this isn't the first case. Well, that is true. Let me just take a minute to talk about what executive orders are. And you're exactly right. Executive orders are typically treated like law. Exactly right. But the issue with it, what makes them different than law is that, and we're really seeing this now, is that executive orders don't have the same level of permanency than law. They're much easier to undermine. This is why he was able to go in and write his executive orders, because every president that comes in has the ability to write executive orders. In that sense, they can also nullify the executive orders of previous presidents on day one. So, for example, you all remember his first day in office and the first time he won was basically nullifying all of as many of Obama's executive orders that he could, because as you might recall, after Obama's first 2 years, when they lost control of Congress, the Republicans basically would not support anything that the Obama administration was trying to push through as law. So the only way that he was able to get other things through, past basically the Affordable Care Act, was he had to go the executive order route, because the Republicans were very, very staunch in opposing any and everything that he tried to get through as an actual law. That made it so very vulnerable, because any executive order can be eliminated by the next president. Laws are a lot more difficult to get rid of. That's why they have deeper permanence than executive orders. But you're exactly right. While executive orders are in place, they do have the force of law. Now, what he's done here, though, is the executive orders that he's most recently pushed through this federal, particularly as it relates to DEI, where he, in the letter of the executive order, like literally in the language of the executive order, if you were to read it, you all, he specifically calls DEI illegal. He has no legal basis for saying that. There's no laws, there's no rulings, there's no court rulings that have called DEI illegal. He just made it up, right? He put it in this executive order. They rescinded all of this funding, and that federal court judge has said that itself is illegal, that itself is unconstitutional. And so they have, in essence, said that those contracts need to be reinstated. Now, here are a couple of things I will say. For those of you then who already have federal contracts, you should be, the spigot should be turned back on if they were to follow this ruling. And I say that with a big if, with a big ass if. And here's why I say that. This right here might be the space where we see the very beginnings of the constitutional crisis that a lot of people have been talking about with this administration. When people talk about a constitutional crisis and what that would look like, it would look like the court saying one thing and the executive branch saying, make me. Let me say that again. What a constitutional crisis will look like in this nation is the court saying one thing and the executive branch saying, make me. Because here's the reality. They can't. They can't. This is where we might run into some problems here. We have to see, is the Trump administration going to respect this ruling? Now, there have been some other rulings where they have respected it. You guys might recall one of the things they tried to do early, like very early on, was they tried to pull back all this money from all these different programs, which is like a huge swath of programs, even over and above what they've already done. And there was an immediate pushback on it. They were trying to eliminate access to, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, like all these things. And there was this huge blowback. There was a court ruling that said, no, you can't do that. And they capitulated really quickly. They pulled it back. Here is my concern with this one. And we'll see, because this just happened like last night. So we'll have to see what happens on Monday, like the first business day. But here's my concern number one. Concern number one is, we know this is one area where is their top priority. Let's just be real. This is their top priority. This is the one thing that they went after on day one after coming into office. Isn't that interesting? Because he claimed on day one he was going to end the war. He claimed on day one he was going to bring down the cost of groceries. He hadn't gotten around to either one of those. But this is what he did on day one. This is what he did on day one. And he did it not only with regards to these executive actions, he also installed his lawyer, let's just say that, over the Department of Justice, who has also come out to say, and I hope somebody's suing her on this because this too is illegal, that they are going to pursue criminal charges against private companies that implement DEI programs. Okay. You also look at what they actually have done in practice. What have they done in practice? They've literally sort of gutted and targeted specific people who are basically not white men for removal. I mean, look at what just happened yesterday with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Only the second Black person in history to hold that position, 4-star general. He fired him, replaced him with a white male 3-star general, also fired the highest ranking, I want to say, woman in the Navy. So this is something that they are prioritizing as an administration. And even if he does move forward and comply in the short term, here is my even bigger concern, which this is probably going to be the play that they're going to do. They're probably going to be like, oh, that's cool. Let's take it to the Supreme Court. Because they know they have packed the court with people who are of the same mindset. When we saw the Dobbs decision come down, which is the decision that eliminated Roe v. Wade, which overturned Roe v. Wade, if you were to read the supporting opinion that was published by Sambo Thomas, okay, Clarence Thomas, you will see there that in his supporting decision, he is saying that now they need to go after literally every other right that we've experienced in terms of expansions of civil rights in this country, short of the Loving decision. He wants to keep the Loving decision in place, but everything else he wants to dismantle. Now, first thing you might want to ask yourself is, well, what the hell is the Loving decision? Well, the Loving decision was the Supreme Court decision that made it okay to have interracial marriages. And oops, guess what? He just happens to be married to a white woman. So he doesn't want to mess that one up because that would impact him in a way that he cares about. But since he's so deeply embedded in the sunken place, he does not care about the fact that when he's going after civil rights, even though he's Black, right, that would hurt other people that looks like him, because I really believe in his mind, he has such a deep hatred for himself that he is trying his best to get as white adjacent as possible, even if that means being the traitor that he is. Okay. Well, you know I'm right, billionaire coach. Getting the kick out of me saying Sambo Thomas, but y'all know I'm right. Hello. So listen, so anyway, he said in that legislation, he named out everything. Like, you need to go after the Civil Rights Act. You need to go after the Voting Rights Act, which they already have gutted, basically. You need to go after gay rights that, make it illegal to discriminate against gay people who want to go and like buy from a particular store. Like those types of things are things that they all want to go after. This is why I was so adamant, honestly, you guys, during the campaign to say, y'all really think they're going to stop at reversing the Roe decision? Y'all really think they're going to stop there? They're not. They're going to keep going. And this case, unfortunately, I'm glad about the short-term gain with this case, but what I'm really concerned about is it's a whole lot easier, you guys, to undo an executive order. As I mentioned, it's a whole lot easier to undo an executive order. So if this was the case for the next 4 years, it would hurt. It would be horrible. But as soon as you get a Democratic president in there, he could easily undo it. It's not so easy to undo a Supreme Court ruling. Hear me when I say that. It is so much easier to undo an executive order than it is to undo a Supreme Court ruling. Supreme Court rulings typically stand for decades, if not forever, because what they do is that they create a precedent. And it's much more difficult to get a future Supreme Court to go against a precedent. Do you understand? Let's see. Sorry, let me see what this is. Can I be a contrary? Absolutely, you can be. So here is what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about this going to the Supreme Court, which it will. I mean, I think that was part of their plan from the very beginning, to put so much stuff out there that's so radical that they knew that it would produce, and rightly so, challenges in the court, because they feel confident that they have sufficiently packed the court such that when it goes to the Supreme Court, they can solidify it much so that it's built and woven into the fabric of this country's legal structure much longer than any one presidential administration. I believe that was the plan all along. And though I'm happy that at least for the current folk, it looks like if they comply with this, at least for now, you're going to be able to get your contracts reinstated. Now, it doesn't say anything. Let me read this, because I had a question about, can I be a contrarian? So let me see what it is. I think it's great because we have depended on the government too long. Our community now has enough resources that we can look out for our own. That's okay. I would love that. I don't completely. Here's how I feel about that. And I definitely understand that viewpoint. I'm not going to disrespect what you just said there, billionaire coach, because I honestly believe that is the answer. The answer is for us to look out for ourselves and take care of one another. So I have nothing disparaging to say about that. But what I am going to say is there right now, there is not the same level of, I guess, practices that have been put in place for us to sustain each other to the degree that would be necessary to match where we are right now. And I would also say, I don't believe that we've really depended on the government per se. What we have done is we have relied on laws to make people act more fairly, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Because if, for example, there were no such thing as the 1964 Civil Rights Act, if there were no such thing as the 1965 Voting Rights Act, we would not have been extended the right to vote the way that we were. We would not have the opportunity to be able to, break the segregationist sort of hold on what we could and could not do, or where we could and could not go, and spaces that we could and could not enter. Those laws brought through oftentimes legal challenges that went all the way up to the Supreme Court were necessary in order to counteract what was deeply embedded social traditions and sometimes actual laws, like laws that were put in place in various states and in this nation that made it difficult for us to gain access to opportunity in America. Look, for example, in terms of how the Homestead Act created opportunity for white folks to get free land at the same time that we couldn't get our 40 acres in the mule. Look at how you had the extension of opportunities that led to the building of suburbs coming back from right after World War II, where white folks were able to sort of start to get access to home ownership at the same time that we were barred from those opportunities. And at the same time, we had a federal government that was actually writing and giving people examples of restrictive covenants so that when they sold their homes, they could specifically put in there, but don't sell it to Black people. And we know that, home ownership has historically been one of those key ways in which people can be able to build and pass down wealth from one generation to generation. We know about the redlining. We know about all of those things that were legally structured systems of racism, in addition to just the cultural practices of racism. We know about the legally structured systems of racism that kept Black people locked out of wealth building opportunities. And to the degree that there were, our ability to create our own opportunities, oftentimes they were either eliminated by sheer terror and violence, or they ultimately kind of crashed down on their own over time as people started to be able to sort of explore other opportunities. But here's the thing, I don't think we're there. This is where we disagree. I don't think we're quite there yet, because here is the challenge. 96%, I want to say it's 96%, maybe it's 98, but I want to say about definitely well over 95% of Black business owners are solopreneurs. I want y'all to let that solidify for a minute. Yes, it is true that when Black businesses they are disproportionately likely to hire other Black people. Like Black people, I have Black people that I hire to do different things for my business and who work with me in my business. And I think, and definitely statistically speaking, that is the case for most Black businesses that have grown to a point where they hire other people. But the vast majority of Black business owners are solopreneurs. The vast majority of Black business owners are solopreneurs. The amount of revenue that the typical Black business owner makes is not anywhere near what their counterparts make in other communities. Okay. So though we have, as a collective, spending power, if that's the figure that you're looking at, I mean, it is estimated that we spend about $1.2 trillion per year that unfortunately don't circulate in our communities enough. And that's a key thing that we need to do. The reality is that a lot of business owners that are our most successful business owners are there because they've either built a business that in one degree could rely on significant government contracts. They then have enough money coming in where they can hire other people. We do have some business owners that are directly sort of, they sell products, they sell services, what all of those other things are. But the bottom line is, a lot of us also get, a lot of our clients are outside of the Black community. It could be contracts with corporations, they could be contracts with the federal government. And so it's hard to replace those contracts. It's hard to replace those contracts by not, in order to replace the amount of revenue that they would have coming in with those contracts, they'd have to do something completely different than what they're doing right now. It would be a complete, like, their target audience. I don't know where you're thinking it would have to be. Are you saying that they should now look to sell directly only to Black people? So what I'm saying is, I see where you're going with it, with your statement there, but I don't think we're quite there yet, because by the nature of how most of us run our businesses, we haven't grown our businesses yet large enough to be able to make up for the opportunities that we would be losing if we were to say, okay, let's just cut off access to federal contracting. Let's cut off access to corporate contracting. Because ultimately, my big focus on what the implications are on this attack on DEI is that it's going to make it harder for those companies, those Black-owned companies right now that are doing businesses with corporations, for example, to keep getting access to those contracts. It's definitely going to be harder for people to get access to federal contracts. And so for a lot of companies, that really is a huge hit. I have even with my event that I'm having next week, I have a survey that's going out, and one of the questions is, have you lost out on business? Of the people that said yes, the majority of them who have said yes have said that they've already lost somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000 in revenue just based on the contracts that they've already lost in this first month. And it's going to be hard for them to turn around and make that up like tomorrow. So we have to, I think that right now, it's a both and. Yeah, we need to focus on circulating within our own community, but we also need to focus on how can we make sure that those businesses that we have in place can grow. What's the most efficient path for them growing so they can get significant contracts so that now they can hire more Black people, right? It's that. I get it. No, because the other cultures will always buy from us. Other cultures will always buy from us. I don't know that I agree with that. I think other cultures will always try to copy us and then buy theirs. I don't necessarily agree that other cultures will always buy from us. I do agree that other cultures will always be inspired by us. I do agree that other cultures will always try to copy our creativity. But I think that history will, if you just look at what typically happens, oftentimes people will copy what we do and then seek to make money off of themselves versus buy from us. So I think that's the biggest challenge there. But let me just say, because I think I probably went down that rabbit hole a little bit too long. Here's the main point I'm making, you guys, about this ruling. This ruling means in the short term, if you already have a contract, keep an eye on your email on Monday, because if they're going to abide by this ruling, that means that it needs to be reinstated, because I know that it's already been canceled. I have clients who have already had no worries. I think it was a good conversation. I think I have clients who have already lost contracts, honestly, you guys. And so I am hoping that this means on Monday, they're going to get emails that will say, hey, it's back on. Here's my concern, though. We know who these people are. These are white supremacist Nazis to the core. They don't want to abide by this ruling. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, are they going to just say, okay, in the short term, we're just going to go ahead and do it and go ahead and appeal or take it to another federal court and see if they can work on our, I know ultimately they want to get it to the Supreme Court so they can solidify this so they can make it that much harder for this to ever come back in the future. Okay. But look, hopefully it's there. Now, for those of you who don't currently have a contract in this space, don't expect to get one, honestly, because even if they are made to live by and abide by this particular ruling is not making them say that they have to say yes to other people in the future. I mean, they can come up with any old lie to say why they're not going to fund you, but we all know that they are not going to fund you. They've already put out this list. I don't think that it doesn't look like this ruling had to do with that, but they've already put out a list of specific words that they've already said they're not going to fund anything that has these words in it. So words like diversity, words like equity, even words like women or, all of that are things that they've already said they're not going to fund. So if you don't already have a contract, know that this does not mean that they're going to all of a sudden they're going to be back to moving in the same direction that they had already moved on this issue. Also know that companies have already pulled back. Many companies have already pulled back. In spite of this ruling, they know who's in charge. They're afraid of Trump. They're not going to want to run afoul of Trump. So I really honestly do not expect them to go back to what they were doing. So yes, this is a short-term victory. And yes, this is a victory that in the short term, if applied with, it will help certain people. But I don't think let me just say, this is not the end of the story. There's going to need to be more fighting that happens to resolve this. And my concern is that this makeup of the Supreme Court does not look like it's going to be supportive of us in any way, shape, or form. That said, I do agree with my friend there, Billionaire Coach, that at the end of the day, the answer is for us to be able to create our own opportunity. And also to be able to understand what opportunities exist now that I can go after, even if I have to shift a little bit, even if I have to broaden my scope a little bit, even if I have to do things a little bit more differently in order to take advantage of the opportunities that exist right now, which is why I put together innovation. Next guest, you read really? Okay, cool. So I definitely want to take a minute, you guys, before I go on with my day, because I'm a little hungry, haven't eaten yet, so it's time for breakfast. Okay. I do want to take a minute to invite you to join me for innovation. This is a 5-part series that I've developed to help you to be able to see that in spite of what goes on, in spite of the ridiculous that goes on in DC, in spite of the ridiculous that's going on down the street from me today at CPAT, and I understand that Beelzebub are going to be speaking there today. So I'm just going to stay in my house and try to stay away from that foolishness. But here's what I want you to understand. No matter what the shifts are that are coming, understand that your worst reaction right now is to be stuck in paralysis and trying to wait and see what happens. Okay. Your best reaction is to say, how can I get into action? How can I move into motion in a direction that makes sense right now? And so it's going to require you to assess the lay of the land right now. Determine what are the opportunities that exist right now that intersect with your capabilities. Maybe even think even broader about what your capabilities are. Maybe you need to start doing things that you haven't done in a few years. Maybe you need to start developing and really monetizing talents and abilities that you've kind of put on the side, right? Or that you haven't fully leaned into. Now's the time to sort of reassess all of that. Build that muscle of creativity and think, what am I going to do next that's going to bring in my next 6 figures in revenue, that's going to bring in my next couple of 6 figures in revenue. Maybe that will take me all the way to 7. Okay. And that is what I'll be breaking down starting next week. So if you have not signed up, feel free to join us. Just go to innovationtoelevation.com, sign up there, innovationtoelevation.com. If you want more details, you can also just write innovate in the chat. I'll send you the link. You can check it out. It's completely complimentary, but it's really meant for you to leave there knowing what's the current lay of the land? What's the situation? How can I figure out the opportunity that I need to zone in on right now and monetize, and then leave there with the idea of this is what I need to do moving forward. This is my marching orders for being able to make my next six, multi six, or dare I even say seven figures in your business moving forward. I will say the biggest thing, I will always say this, the biggest thing that helped me to be able to grow a seven-figure business was that I took advantage of the opportunity that lived in the eye of chaos. And when all of my peers were sitting back there wondering what the hell to do, if they should do anything at all, just trying to wait it out, I was moving. This may be a crisis in many instances, this in many perspectives. I'm not going to downplay that at all. This may be a very disorienting moment for you. This may be a very scary moment for you, but this is also a moment that holds great opportunity for you. And if you just take this time now, then to lean into this, get the jump start on your competition, get the head start on your competition, then let me just say, this could be the moment that could catapult you to the next level in your business. What feels very uncomfortable right now actually could be the best thing that ever happened to you if you lean into the power of innovation. And that's exactly what I want to pull out of you next week. So go ahead, grab your spot, innovationtoelevation.com. I look forward to seeing you there. With that said, I hope y'all have a happy Saturday, and I'll see you guys later. Bye, everybody. Take care.